Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Phil Klein, and I am the founder and CEO of Viva Learning. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for your continued interest and confidence in Viva Learning, especially during this unprecedented time. Since 1999, we have provided the dental community with thousands of hours of quality CE, and during this difficult time, we are proud to continue to bring you the important information you need that will help all of us in our dental communities across the globe get through this pandemic successfully. Over the past 6 weeks, we are seeing more than 7 times our normal website traffic. So again, I would like to thank all of you for your support, and special thanks to our dedicated staff here at Viva Learning for the incredible work they have done to keep everything going as smoothly as possible during this crisis. Today, as a public service to our Viva members, we will be presenting the webinar, Reopening Your Dental Office Post-COVID-19. Viva Learning is proud to have Dr. Mark Cannon as our speaker, especially on such a timely and important topic. Dr. Cannon is a professor of otolaryngology, Division of Dentistry at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine, an attending physician at Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital, and a member of the International Association of Pediatric Dentistry. In addition to being the founder of Associated Dental Specialists of Long Grove, he is the research coordinator of the Pediatric Dental Residency Program at Ann and Robert Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Cannon has 40 years of experience in pediatric dentistry and has presented lectures both nationally and internationally. I would like to mention Dr. Cannon has worked very hard on putting together this presentation today and is doing all of this as a public service and is not receiving any kind of honorarium or compensation for his efforts. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mark Cannon.
Thank you so very much, Phil, and it's really wonderful to be with everyone this afternoon. I want to share with you my own experience at reopening the dental office. So there's a lot of practical information, and I hope that you realize that I'm working hard to get my office open, just like you have worked hard to get your office ready to go. Who am I? Well, as was mentioned, I'm a full professor. I'm in charge of a lot of research. You probably have read some of my research articles. I'm in private practice, same location for 40 years, many second-generation patients. Diplomate and Fellow of the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry. I'm a Fellow of the Academy of Dental Materials, Fellow of the Royal Society of Medicine, Fellow on the Executive Board of the American Academy of Oral Systemic Health. Got 5 children, 3 grandkids. I love cars and cooking, live music, beaches, and microbreweries. And like the rest of you, I am suffering through quarantine. I can't wait to be released and free. But in the meanwhile, we have to talk to our patients, and patient communication is so very important. I'm sure almost all of you have something like Next Health or Lighthouse 360 or Solution Reach, where you've been reaching out to your patients on a regular basis with emails, and you have to have the capability to text them too, because you know that, as we have found out, that many people don't read their emails anymore because they get hundreds of emails every day. And I'm the same way. I don't have time to read all these emails, but we've been trying very hard to send newsletters, and I'll share you some of the verbiage that we've had in some of our newsletters. And then also do your social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Do everything you need to do to communicate with your patients and use telemedicine. Now, we're fortunate that we get a free trial on Confrere from Next Health. And this may be the new norm for a lot of things, because when you use these telemedicine things, there's codes now too, like D9995 if you do it real time, and D996 if you do it later, like by email. But you can schedule time for your patients to actually do a video call. But what I prefer to do is send the link directly to the patient. I have them email me, and then I email them back saying, or I send back a text message with Next Health saying, hey, let's schedule a video call so I can actually have communication and talk face-to-face with my patients. Newsletter, I mentioned, this is some verbiage from the newsletter we sent out when we closed. We said, we really hope everyone's in good health, but your appointment has been canceled. Now, as you know, a lot of people still called saying, I don't have an appointment anymore, but we couldn't help anything. I mean, it was because, and I stress this, you have to let people know, We didn't close ourselves. We were closed. And we were all closed by state and local government mandates, stay-at-home orders that we had, and we could only do emergent care. We're not supposed to be doing routine care. And we've been very, very adamant letting people know that it wasn't just something that we decided on doing ourselves. I'm fortunate, one of my partners, Dr. Michael Durbin, is a phenomenal orthodontist. He's been in close communication with patients, making sure they don't get overcorrection, that they wear their elastics, and just at night, to keep their corrections. And he's been having them call him on his cell phone so he can directly communicate. In reopening, we told them it won't be the same. And I'll show you many slides of all this. You have to check in by phone, and that's actually what they're doing in most states. You check in by phone when you get to the parking lot. We will tell you when to come up by text message. Only the patient should come up, or in our case, a patient and an adult guardian. And if they both come up, a patient and the adult guardian, will take both of their temperatures and check out both of them in the hallway at our check-in station if they've been exposed recently. We have a current health history, and we have informed everyone in advance that testing may be required. And we're going to talk a lot about testing today. We have assigned seating areas, and I'll show you pictures of these too. So when they are told to come up, they're told they have to come in, they're going to be screened, and when they get seated, they have a specific seating area. And those are designed to maintain social distancing. And we also have told everyone only patients are in treatment areas, and they can't bring their cousins and second cousins and neighbors and friends, because our office used to be a really fun place with lots of video games and TVs everywhere, and everyone always brought their friends. And now we have to say you can't do that anymore. There's no more treasure basket just to reach in and play with. All aerosol producing procedures are done in closed operatories, and that we will start the hygiene and so on once we're allowed to. And we'll talk about some hints on that. This is a time for dentistry to shine. This is for us to really now work with all the preventative products we have on our hands. The probiotics like Probiora, MI-Paste, xylitol mouth rinses, nasal sprays, xylitol and fluoride toothpaste. There's so many things we should be doing. And of course, also advising people, stay away from all those bad carbs. Think about the statistics. When you hear someone say, well, 70% of the deaths in our area from COVID-19 have been on people who have hypertension, are overweight, are diabetics, and you think, oh, let's see, all three now are closely linked to what? Sugar. So, all the current research shows that sugar raises blood pressure more than salt. And now we're going like, oh, we've really got to be concerned, because all these people who have bad health are the ones that are suffering the most. So we have really strongly encouraged them to contact, mostly by email. Office preparation, I'm sure you've already done all this, but if you haven't, do it real quick, because the patients expect it, and so will your team members. They'll expect to see that the walls have been scrubbed or repainted. I scrubbed a lot of walls. We have protective shields. I'll show you those. For our reception desk, chairs have been recovered in the reception, or we have covers, washable ones we can take on and off. I've cleaned the ducts, repainted the ceiling. The carpet's being shampooed on Sunday for whatever patients we can see next week. All the equipment's been disinfected. I'll show you everything on this. We have the new HEPA UVC air cleaning units set up to clean the air. I'll show you the research on that. And we try to develop a negative pressure in our operatories. I'll show you pictures on that too. And on my wish list is that when the team members check in, and we use ADP, when they punch in on ADP, they have a little questionnaire they have to fill out at the same time. I'm still pushing to have that done. It's not done yet. It still is on my wish list. So here's our reception shields. I made those shields, and you can see they match the wood and everything. I'm behind the desk there using the PPE has been recommended. We have our N95 mask, our face shields. We have our isolation gowns. We have our touchless infrared thermometers. We got 3 of those in. But I really had to scrounge for supplies. I'm sure everyone is in the same boat. We all were scrounging and getting what we could from whoever we could. And in fact, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I had to pay cash for some N95 masks. One of the things I really tried very hard to get done and we had on order was antibody testing for the team members. And I'll talk to you about why in just a few seconds. But we have dedicated office shoes, the isolation gowns, N95 masks, the face shields, and we have our UVC working and some CPAP cleaning units. And that's something we really have to talk about. I'll show you some pictures of those. We're having the employees in for training, additional training, which are required to by almost all the states. And we ordered the additional scrubs. And I actually went around to several uniform stores to pick up extra supplies for the whole team. I ordered this from Benco. It was available from Benco. It supposedly was sitting in a warehouse ready to be shipped to me, and then I was told I could not have it. That it was being sent to someone else. But this is an antibody test kit, the BioSys, and a test for IgM and IgG. Now, it depends on which state you're in, whether or not you as a dentist could use this, but I had worked out a deal in my medical building with an internal medicine specialist who said he would do it. And so I checked to make sure I wasn't going to violate any laws. And I did talk about employment law with someone who is up on employment law, saying, yes, we could have our employees get tested. They could always decline being tested, but then we'd have to make some type of special accommodation. So again, check your local laws because each state is different, right? Were there problems with antibody testing? Yes, absolutely. Just yesterday I was on the phone. You guys probably know I do a lot of research and especially in microbiome, and so I'm pretty used to all this stuff. But I was talking to a very famous researcher, and he was telling me that he was offered 1,000 antibody tests by a guy who owns a service station. And they were all Chinese ones. Those are the ones that only worked 50% of the time. And so you have to be very, very careful. There's a lot of junk out there. The FDA keeps warning people about it, but all it takes is a finger stick. You can get your IgM and your IgG, and they vary a lot in sensitivity and specificity. A lot of the ones that were first coming into the country just simply did not work, and they would not detect the antibody if you had the antibody. They were not sensitive enough. And because a lot of them have just emergency approval, they really have not been through thorough testing. There's at least 29, and this is a week old, so there's probably like 40 sets of antibody tests out there right now. Again, sensitivity is the ability to always detect it. It has to be very sensitive, so it picks up the antibodies as the Abbott Laboratory ones. That was the Alair system. ID Now, that was bought by Abbott Labs, heavily tested actually at Northwestern and Anna Robert Laurie Children's Hospital. I know some of the people who did the testing of it, and it's very, very, very accurate. 99, 100% sensitive. Okay, specificity is 99.5%. So it's very, very specific. It won't show that there's antibodies when there shouldn't be antibodies. It's very sensitive. It picks up all the antibodies, but it's very, very specific, which is fantastic. However, if you look down this published list from just a week ago, there's one of them that was only 45% sensitive. So half the time was missing the antibodies. Anesthesia preparation, we do full mouth rehabilitations under general anesthesia. If we do so at Anna Robert Laurie Children's at their outpatient center, we actually have a drive-through, and the patients go through the drive-through to be tested 72 hours before, and they get a nasal pharyngeal swab, which is not very comfortable. Now, in your office, we are really blessed that a very well-known company with an excellent reputation, Oral DNA, has the Oral Risk COVID-19. Now that's the nasal, pharyngeal, and saliva collection one. It still takes about 72 hours and you obtain it in the office, but let's think of it this way. If you're a general dentist and you're doing all this restorative, and this patient needs tons of restorative crowns, perio surgery, you name it, implants, bridges, you're much better off investing in having them get tested to make sure that they're not full-blown into disease and that they could contaminate your entire office, because God forbid that would happen. And all you can do is just simply have them go in. They can get the nasal pharyngeal and oral. You can do that in your office. You can collect it and send it off. I'll show you more on that. Now, there's other companies out there. There's others like Microgen DX or Microgen Dex and Viome. Now, I'm very fortunate because I've worked a lot with Viome in the past. We just finished a great study, a transcriptome study on the metabolomics of 30 kids with autism compared to 30 kids. I went down to Colombia in South America to a blue zone to look at their microbiome and see what were the differences. And so we've done some phenomenal research together. And Viome has a fecal test. That's a home test that patients can do. They can send their own feces in because you shed the virus fecally for 2 weeks past when you don't shed it anymore nasopharyngally. So you can really have the patients do a test at home. They can order the test. You can say to them, hey, I want to see you. I want to get this work done, but you're going to come in for 4 or 5 visits. I want to make sure you don't have you're not shedding coronavirus in my office. And they also have, unbelievably, and this is so fascinating, I'm glad to be the first to even bring this up in a public forum. They have an oral test, and the oral test will detect oral cancer with an accuracy of 91.9% before you have a clinical sign. And actually, I'm very happy. I hope to be part of the trial on that. We've been talking about getting that going. And these are some really phenomenal things, because you see, testing will be the new norm. Testing is going to be the new norm. Now, testing has been around since the 1990s. I did a lot of the caries risk tests in the past. We use caries screening all the time in the office from Carie Free. Well, not use all the time, but we use it when it's indicated. But oral DNA, that's another test I've been exposed to for many, many years. I started with them back when they were in Brentwood, Tennessee. They're now in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. And Microgen Dex, I mentioned them before, they're out of Lubbock, Texas, since 2008. So let's just look at oral DNA, just simply at the salivary diagnostic testing, where they can test for bacteria like periopath. So if you have someone coming in, you're going to do the COVID-19, they need perial surgery, why not go ahead? You can actually use the same salivary sample. You can run for the top 11 periodontal pathogens. You can look at caries bacteria too. 3 species of bacteria they look at for caries. You can look at them genetically to see if they're prone to inflammation and periodontal disease. They have tests for that. You can look at them virally too, not just for COVID, or in this case, SARS-CoV-2 is the actual virus. But you also can use oral risk for human papilloma virus, and also for the herpes simplex virus, and also for Candida species, for fungals. So, this is really important because HPV has been associated with 6 different types of cancers. So you have all this testing capability. I think, by God, finally, we're going to be doing lots of testing, and this is what's really best for patients anyway. So the oral risk COVID-19 PCR test is a wonderful test utilizing nasal swab, oral rinse. I say it's wonderful because they're at 99.9% or 99.99% sensitivity. They're as good as any other tests out there by far. It's extremely specific. Again, it will only show SARS-CoV-2 virus at like a 99.99%. So if you do that test and the patient comes back positive, they shouldn't be treated for at least 14 days and have them do a self-quarantine. And then you can safely treat them. How about your employees too? Do you want an employee coming in sick and getting everyone else sick? Now, the difference between using the molecular tests and looking actually for the virus itself and doing antibodies is time frame. You have the shedding of the virus sometimes before you have any symptoms whatsoever. You can be shedding the virus away, and so you can collect that. The antibody is good later. In fact, 100% of people, once they have it, COVID-19 will develop IgG at 39 days or better. So that is a wonderful test to use also. It's just that we don't have our antibody tests available like I thought we would. So getting the dental office back to work, well, you got the COVID-19 safe office protocol they develop where you can test your employees, you can test your patients, and make sure that you're safe. And then testing is, again, not new. I mean, look at Microgendex. They've already done over 20,000. This is old. This is a week ago. In fact, I think there are over 35,000 tests. I think I know how I can judge that. So they are very specific on their instructions. I would tell you, follow their instructions like you would for this very carefully. Wash your hands. Make sure you don't contaminate. I've talked to the Microgendex people. If they get a sample in and the lid isn't tight, or if it's leaked, they got to throw it all away. Make sure you really tighten that lid down carefully when you collect it. And when you collect it, you're supposed to cough and bring up your cough into your saliva, and you spit that into the collection cup, and you have about that amount you see of that blue liquid. Of course, hopefully your spit and saliva won't be blue, or we have a real problem. You got to stop drinking that Listerine, okay? And then you tighten that down, you package it up, and you send it off FedEx. And it goes off FedEx, you drop it off at a box. And that's very, very specific. So they give you directions for a vial and also for the cup. And then you have to seal it up really, really well and send it off in the box like you see there. Now I'm showing you mine. This is what I did before I went back to work. I said, hey, I want to be tested so I can tell my patients and my team members, I'm tested and I'm negative. Now I couldn't do the antibody. The ideal would have been to done the antibody and, hey, look, I'm IgG, guys. Hey, look at that. You know, it's like a badge you wear. You know, you put it on your phone and show everyone, here's my test, dudes. But I didn't get it done. I will hopefully have it done next week. But I did get this done. And see, I'm test number 31,797, it looks like, off that order sheet. So that means they're probably up to about 33, 34,000 tests right now. I'm sure that oral DNA is doing a ton too. What is extra special, exciting to me is the point of contact. Now, I tried to get one of these ID Now units like you see on the screen there, and I tried to order one. I tried to order one through a physician friend. I have accounts at medical supply companies, but they won't send it to me. Now, this will be the standard of care. It's isothermonucleic acid amplification technology, and it provides it in just minutes, but only does one test at a time. But guess what, guys? There's another machine coming out there, a POC, and they will be selling it to dentists. And this POC can run 3 tests at once. You'll have 3 different areas where you can put 3 different sets of reagents and run 3 tests at once. Now, you know, quite frankly, coronavirus will be back, or something like it. And we'll talk about that too later. But this will happen again. And now we have different standards of care. Now the research in this is just being completed. They are just getting geared up to start manufacturing these boxes. But they say, hey, in August, at the latest, late August, if the epidemiologists are correct, we're going to have another spike in the fall. We'll have these coming on the market, but they run 3 different sets. And within the next year, to be able to test for a number of different viruses, including periodontal viruses that are not only associated with periodontal disease, but also with oral cancer. So there's tons of potential with these new tests. And I'm really excited because we're going to be doing some of the clinical trials here too with that. Now, ideally with patients really expect to walk in and see something different in your office. So when they walk in, they'll see the check-in station, they'll see the shields I made, and I have a PowerPoint on how to make those shields too, by the way. They look really, really good. But we've sent them out these little things. You know, expect you might be asked to do a salivary sampling. It depends on the procedures, of course, and how many times you have to see the patient back, and how many aerosol procedures you have to do. But I think they do a salivary sampling would be very reasonable to expect from them. Patients should wear their own masks. Of course, if they come with parents, they have to wear theirs. We're going to have them do a hydrogen peroxide rinse beforehand. And at this stage in the state of Illinois, we're only doing emergent care. So we can provide palliative care without doing an aerosol, like doing temporary restorations or using silver diamine fluoride. But again, we got to shine. This is a time to really push the preventive care. When people are asking you, what can I do? Say, go to Whole Foods, get some good xylitol mouth rinse, like a spray mouth rinse, and start rinsing with it and so forth. Use your xylitol, get it, keep away from sugar, because too many people are sitting home eating a ton of garbage right now. You can also suggest to them, if you're going to be doing like the oral DNA or a risk COVID-19 test, that if these people need perio procedures, why don't you test for the periodontal pathogens too? And start putting that into your regular protocol for treatment. Assigned seating, got to get the posters up from the CDC. And at this point, I would only see the very healthy patients. If you can put off other people, simply do. If you have a patient with hypertension, they're overweight, they're diabetic, and you're planning on doing a ton of operative on them, I think maybe you should put that off. It may take a whole extra day just to deep clean your office every week too. So all the patients are expecting extended hours. How are we going to do extended hours when we need to do extended cleaning? I don't know. Hygienists are very, very concerned about this. How can I treat my patients? Well, you know what? I think dentistry has to adapt. And there are ways of using like the Butler Proficiency Cups, which are pasteless but have the abrasive built in, that you can actually go in and do a polishing and do hand scaling. And especially I think we should start with children, because that's the safest population. And make sure your vacuum pump is set to high level. It always surprises me when I visit a friend's practice and maybe they're finishing a procedure and I hear this little wimpy vacuum go barely sucking at all. And we have our set to go between 25 and 28 millimeters pull of mercury, so we don't have that big aerosol. Use a rubber dam. Vent your operatories to the outside. There are several ways of doing this. You can just put bathroom vents in many offices. Put a bathroom vent in, connect it to your light. You turn on your light, the bathroom vent turns on, and it blows the air directly outside through your soffit if your building will allow you to accommodate that. You could do that very inexpensively, or just window fans. That will help a lot. Nitrous oxide we're going to talk about, and fluoride varnish. In the older kids, the younger kids, do the APF foam and wipe it off with a 2x2. The advantage, again, if you're doing a prophylaxis on a 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 6-year-old, whatever, you can hand scale those. You're not going, usually you don't see a lot of Berman stain or espresso stain. You probably don't see that much tobacco stain on your 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. Usually you could probably hand scale those, not use a Cavitron, and use the Butler Proficiency Cup. And again, younger kids use a foam, older kids use a fluoride varnish. And why do we say that? Well, because, I keep telling people, look at the research. This is published in 2018 by Jeremy Horst et al. And, Jason Tanzer and Peter Milgram, they're very famous researchers. They reviewed the literature. 5 out of 6 studies employing fluoride varnish alone showed no prevention of new lesions. This is in kids. Okay. Fine in adults and kids, no. And we keep saying that in pediatric dentistry. We're having a hard time getting people to realize that there is an age cutoff on this. And if you don't believe me, look at the studies. I got the studies up over here. You see combined intervention, the benefit, none, 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 none. And the ones that showed some benefit, guess what? They think it was the fluoride toothpaste as opposed to no fluoride. And it was the guidance that was given to the patients, that they were given lots of good oral hygiene instructions. You must be really very careful with research, because this is what we keep finding out, that things that look like a good idea don't always turn out to be a good idea. But to my book, children should come first. You can do it without prophylaxis paste, so you don't have to do a lot of suction. You don't even need to use your suction at all. Just use 2x2s and stir them away. Scale. Look for caries. Go ahead, get your radiographs. Use a Diagadent. Do your CAMX spectra. You should be able, if they're a gagger, don't try to get the radiographs. You don't want them gagging all over. If you have really big open apparent lesions, very carefully, don't get on soft tissue. Apply your silver diamine fluoride. I love to show this slide because this is what happens when a pediatrician does it. Now we have pediatricians out there who are now putting SDF in quite a bit in many locations, and they shouldn't be because they can't really isolate, they can't do anything, they don't have a good enough light, and of course they can't take x-rays. Without being able to take x-rays, they're putting the SDF really in cases where the caries is already down into the pulp, and you don't want that done because there's no benefit. This kid came in a few days after the pediatrician has seen him, had SDF the lesion, said, "You're okay now. I stopped the cavity." And they come in with a roaring abscess. So, hey, you know, that's not good. The other thing, and I have to thank the people up at the University of Minnesota, Elise Arvis and Jeff Karp, really wonderful people, about how they wrote into the American Academy of Pediatrics and say, hey, you guys are doing the silver diamine fluoride, all this stuff, but at the same time, many of them are doing a fluoride varnish on these little kids. And again, there's no benefit to that. And because there's no benefit, at the same time, you're going, no one's done a safety profile on doing the varnish and the SDF at the same time. Just to be good for them not to do that. So let's take a look here. This is the office. You walk in, you see the check-in station. I put my unused chairs that we don't need anymore in behind that area, but they're not there anymore. They're actually being recovered right now with a very easily cleaned surface, fake Naugahyde. And the check-in station, got your mask, your sanitizer, your thermometer, touchless, CDC instructions. You can do the survey. And ideally, you would have a team member that has shown positive for the IgG antibodies. Even in the hallway, we spaced out the chairs. We don't want people sitting in the hallway, but to get off the elevator and to sit down, we don't want them sitting next to each other. And I disinfected the chairs. All the magazines are removed. So as they are allowed to come in, the first thing they do is station A, where they do their hand sanitizer. I've already checked to make sure they have a mask on. Their temperature has already been taken. But A is also for emergencies. So like if they come in, someone comes in at night, a trauma, they hand sanitize and immediately sit down so they don't go any further. Okay. Assign seating areas. If you look really careful, you can see the B, the C, there's a E. In fact, it goes all the way up to L. Seating areas. And this is important because you tell them where to sit, and then someone later on to go back to the area and clean those covers and wipe the area off. So that gives us time to treat each area individually. And you notice that there's HEPA filters working away in the reception area. People expect to see that. It's comforting to them to see that. You can see we have video walls too, showing a lot of nice things. CDC posters throughout the office. Guys, just go online to get these. You don't have to go buy them anywhere. You can go online, print them up, put them up around your office. The rinsing stations. These are our toothbrushing areas, which are no longer used for toothbrushing, but we have our hydrogen peroxide rinses there. Now, you could use hydrogen peroxide like Prevention or Peroxyl. Technically, you could probably use a xylitol mouth rinse too. I would stay away from anything like Listerine because, you know, again, for the alcohol to work, you have to have like 50%, which you're not going to hit with that at all. And you say, why xylitol? Well, because actually there's been a lot of work done on xylitol. And you see a lot in the medical literature, like this is published in Rhinology a few years ago on the effect of just 5 and 10% xylitol on pathogens. And this includes very important ones like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Staphylococcus epidermidis, and so on, and Staph aureus, things that you might have an infection get started in a rhinosinusitis. And the #1 selling nasal spray out there has xylitol in it, which greatly reduces this. You go like, well, is that important? Well, yeah, if a patient's on CPAP, you bet. In many countries, they have people use this before they put their CPAP machine on. You can breathe a lot better, right? But again, in the medical literature, this stuff goes way, way, way back 25 years ago, 1995, where they showed a very strong inhibition of some top pathogens like Strep pneumoniae and Haemophilus influenza, just with 1 and 5% xylitol solutions, which is like, wow, this is pretty interesting because again, and this is a very recent article, xylitol nutrition, if you supplement your patients taking xylitol mints, guess what it does? It greatly increases the survival of rats when they make them septic with pneumococcus. So just supplementing in the diet, xylitol, because it's so anti-inflammatory, it shuts down all those pro-inflammatory cytokines, and the inflammasomes, NLRP3 is shut down by xylitol, and it actually greatly increases survival rats. You go like, where's the human study? Okay, try to do a human study. We're going to give you a lethal dose of pneumococcus to see if you die, and you're going to be in a placebo group, and half of you are going to get xylitol, the other half are going to get sucrose. I mean, I would see lots of volunteers for that, right? Wouldn't you? But again, you got your xylitol mints, stuff like that. So they tell your patients, go to Whole Foods, get some xylitol mints right now, okay? And that will help reduce problems with perio and caries in the meanwhile. But it works against viruses too, which is really, again, very interesting. Here's a very famous one out of South Korea, where they use a rodent model because you can't do this on humans, but they did a human respiratory syncytial virus infection, and they added dietary xylitol and showed a significant effect against this viral infection. And you go like, wow, that is really interesting, because that's one of the reasons we have a difference in fatality rates between different countries. And I have actually brought this up with several top people at medical centers. They all say, oh yeah, we know about it, but there's no patenting, and we can't get any more studies going right now, because look at this study just recently published too, again from South Korea, which is one of the proponents of putting people on dietary xylitol. It is protective against influenza A. So your H1N1 virus is greatly inhibited. Again, it's a protective xylitol against the effects of it. And again, they're given these huge doses and big difference in survivability. Then you say, well, hey, how about SARS-CoV-2? Guess what? That too has been tested. Now, Gustavo Ferrer is a very famous pulmonologist, Cleveland Clinic guy. He was doing clinical trials with a nasal spray using xylitol and chlorphenamine maleic, and it's been very, very, it's huge reduction. And the people at Northwestern University I've shared this with, and at Children's Hospital, are very, very impressed with the potential of this nasal spray. So maybe have a mouth rinse. Maybe they should do a xylitol nasal spray before they come in. I don't know. There's no research on it besides what I've shown you right here, but apparently these are very important issues for us to be concerned about. So the patient finally gets back, okay? You're sitting in your chair, and what do you have working behind them? You have your HEPA filter with a UVC that kills 99.99% of pathogens, right? And UVC has been shown to be very effective in SARS-CoV-2. Now, these units have not been directly tested because these were built long before we knew about coronavirus, right? And so the whole time you're sitting there, you have this nice breeze of this filtered, disinfected air that's protecting you and your team and blowing everything away from the patient. You got the rubber dam on the patient too, and you're running your high vacuum, making sure your vacuum is actually high volume, okay, and not little weak little thing. If you have a bad old vacuum pump, get rid of it today. Get something good in there. UV has been shown effective in eliminating coronavirus from surfaces. So this is something that they don't talk about a whole lot. You hear about hospitals using UV sterilization for masks and so forth. So yeah, this is something to consider for your office, right? And of course, one of the things we could do, and we're on the 3rd floor, so it's kind of easy for us, is we got these vents we can set up for any high aerosol thing. And this is what they used in China. Go back and look at the research when they talked about their negative pressure and how they were evacuating the air. Guess what it was? It was plain old-fashioned window fans. Hurry up and get them from Target for $29 before they sell out, if you can open your windows. And of course, in Chicago, it's so useful because we have nice weather at least 3 weeks out of the year. Nothing should be exposed. The first thing you'd want to do is walk around and say, what is sitting out? And you go, oh my God, I got all this stuff sitting out. It can't be. Now, theoretically, if it's boxed, it's okay because you can unbox it and drop it directly in the patient's hand and throw the box out away in front of them while you still have your gloves on. But if you don't have something like that, if it doesn't come boxed, you got to put it into a container. And I found that apothecary jars seal really tight. You can spray and wipe the outside. Ideally, just put things away in your cabinet, close the doors, and so forth, because you want to be safe, not take any chances on passing on contaminant. I mean, 17 days coronavirus lived on the Princess cruise line. Of course, that was out of the sun. If you have sunlight, that's different, right? Different. Even with humidity, it's different. I picked up some of these boxes too. I mean, seriously, I'm just trying to be very, very upfront. There's something you can just go get. Again, I put the old joke, this is a Target run, right? Get some of these. If you have to put things away like your mask or how about your laser glasses? Where are you going to put those? I got to put them in something like that to keep them clean. And then as I'm going through the office, I'm looking around saying, oh, how about my masks? How about my paper towels? What am I going to do with all those things? Sure, I can put the kids' safety glasses in one of those containers and seal it. And then just pop it open, pop out one and reseal, and then make sure it's kept clean. It's not in any aerosol. One of the things I thought about with my glove dispensers is just cover it with a bouffant. Just put that on the outside to keep the aerosol off of it. And I said, that doesn't look like that's going to work 100%. Okay, so thinking out loud here, I decided shower caps and barrier tape. So you see some foam fluoride that's inside a plastic container and it's covered with a shower cap. I can spray the outside of the shower cap and throw it away. You get like, what, 100 of them for $6.99. Go buy a whole bunch of shower caps, and just because they seal tight, around. And you can close up a lot of things. You get your touchless faucets and all the other stuff to protect your paper towels, or you can move everything into the hallway and just replumb your entire office. The reception chairs, we have covers. I showed you without the covers, now I'm showing you with the covers. These are washable or sprayable, or you can just do reupholstery. And we're doing a combination of the two. We have chairs out being reupholstered right now to a naugahyde that is disinfectant resistant and is actually bacterial resistant. Personal bags for everybody. We have personal bags in the office. I went ahead and initialed a bunch of them. They're actually vacuum bags that people can put their gear in while they eat lunch. And while they're eating lunch, that's where you have their little ozone generator. We can fill the bag with ozone, seal it, and do some disinfection. Now, you have to let it sit out afterwards for at least half an hour, because you don't want to put the ozone treated material directly on your face, of course. It would not be safe. And then, we may have to do this because there's a shortage of PPE, and that's what even the CDC said is, you may have to do this. And of course, using your UVC sterilizers. I have one of these coming. It's a mask sterilizer. I'm sure you've seen these online. Go ahead and order them before they're all sold out. And, I've heard people suggest doing microwaves. If you're going to microwave it, just get one of these fun little microwavable containers. You can put individual masks in. They're actually designed for binkies and everything. Throw it in the microwave, it makes a steam, and it sterilizes it, which again, the CDC says, hey, that's one of your options if you absolutely have to do it. And of course, you'll be covering this N95 with one of your level 3 surgical masks anyway. Nothing should be exposed. So yeah, I picked up some UVC wand sterilizers. I have no idea how effective they are. This one particular one came out with a statement, is FDA approved. Now, I don't know if it really is or not. You have to wonder about that. It kills 99.99% of my microbials. I don't know if that's true. Again, has it really been tested? No, I doubt it. Nitrous oxide analgesia. Actually, I feel that nitrous is probably one of the safest way to do things, because you scavenged it. Everything gets shot outside, right? So you're scavenging the exhaled breath. So you have a rubber dam on, you have a nitrous, they're breathing in and out through their nose, and we use the Porter Silhouette system. But how about the machine? How do you clean the machine? Well, look at that bag. See, the Ambu bag is filled. It's filled with ozone. That's a CPAP cleaning machine. That's an FDA-approved CPAP cleaning machine. And it's attached, and it sets for 30 minutes. And so in between patients, you clean the machine. Again, I know, oh my God, this is going to take so much longer, seeing everyone, right? And then you should let it sit for 30 minutes. You got to really flush it well with oxygen too afterwards. But the inside of the machine is actually being cleaned, because you can see there's a pressure going actually inside the machine because the bag has expanded. Fortunately, these CPAP cleaning units come with a lot of adapters that actually fit on our Accutrons. Wow, how lucky is that? You always soak it in bleach too. Tubing can be bleached, and that takes time. You have to bleach it, let it soak in bleach for half an hour, and then it's got to be dried out, then you got to run air through it, or it's going to really stink, or you can autoclave it if it's autoclavable. As for bleach, if you're having a hard time getting bleach, this is what I use. You can buy these bleach tablets right here that are they break down to regular bleach, same as liquid bleach, and there's each one of those containers is like 20 gallons, so there's a lot in there, right? And we use a disposable nitrous and the hose system called the Porter Silhouette. I've been a great component of that ever since it came out. I think it's one of the best things ever made. They don't pay me anything. I'm not getting any commission or anything on this. But you can see they're clear, so you can see the patient's breath. And this is really important now. You want to see the patient breathing through the nitrous. If you got anything else, throw it away. It's got to be clear. You got to see him breathing in and out through the nitrous hood. Because again, when they breathe out, the scavenger picks it up and shoots it way outside. So the only person who gets the coronavirus is the darn bird that's sitting up on your roof, right? And then the tubing, again, you can sterilize that. What are the contraindications? The same contraindications you've always had, the MTHFR gene mutation, your methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Parents come in all the time talking about MTHFR, and we always say to them, what did you do? Your MTHFR pre-op, your vitamin B12, your N-acetylcysteine, methylphenidate. We always try to be very up on top of that. But if you can use nitrous oxide analgesia, and if they are truly MTHFR, you have to probably use propofol and do a general. But if they aren't, you can use nitrous, and then that reduces the need for general anesthesia. So many times we can see a 3 or 4-year-old and do their operative with no problem whatsoever because we're using the nitrous, we got the rubber dam on, and again, their behavior is so important. What is worse for an aerosol than perhaps a very uncooperative young patient being very noisy in your office? That's really bad. Now, environmental testing, and this is something I'm working on right now. I think that's going to be really, really important. If they had environmental testing, had gone through and tested those subways in New York City and realized that they had been heavily contaminated with coronavirus, things could have been so much different. Because they were passing it on to all the healthcare workers who were taking the subways in and out to work, and then they were taking it into the nursing homes and into the hospitals with them. And of course, in the homeless, that was a big part of the death rate, right? The CFR. That's what I've been told at least. And so you need to have testing just like you do for nitrous oxide. You got your nitrous oxide monitor. You're supposed to every once in a while check and make sure you're not leaking nitrous oxide throughout your office when you use it. So you're supposed to get below 25 parts per million, right? We've done those tests to make sure our scavenger works. Knowing that we're keeping that level below 25 parts per million means that we know that we're not contaminating our entire office with aerosol, right? Because we know we're not leaking. And so that's a really very positive thing, right? But it's interesting because when you look at the ads for a lot of the nitrous oxide testing systems, they have ads like this. You go, where are their masks? Where are their glasses? Look back at those wonderful days when you can actually see the face of the person you're working with. Isn't that amazing? But again, surface testing, when you do it, use gloves. Be sure you use gloves, swab the surface, place in the tube with a preservative, ship it to the lab for analysis, and if it comes back that is negative for coronavirus, and you do this like in a reception area, then you know you're not producing an aerosol. And that's something that's important for you to know, not for yourself, but for your patients and for your team members. It just would make you feel a lot better knowing that your system's working. Now, people say to me, hey, why aren't they listing all these things they're talking about, like ozone generators and UV lights and air purifiers? Wow, how can I use them? Well, the EPA comes out and says, why? Because they only study surface disinfectants. Does not include devices. This is taken right from the EPA site. In other words, dude, it's not my job. We don't include devices. So when you open, protect the most vulnerable, the elderly. Maybe you have to schedule different days. Maybe close on Thursdays, only see them on Fridays. Do a deep cleaning. Postpone care in the high risk. Begin with the youngest and the healthiest, so you know you're not producing a disease in someone that can kill somebody. That's for sure, especially since kids often will have it symptomless. Antibody testing would be great. I can't wait till we all have it. Do the hygiene. Hygienists, we should really petition the government and our own dental societies. Hygiene is crucially important. We have to get the patients in so we can find carious lesions when they're small. Use things like our CAMX spectra. Use your Diagonodent. Find small lesions and be able to do maybe a sealant on something just to hold it until later, okay? But that requires early diagnosis. And one of the things that we use a cordless handpiece, so there's no air even in that hygiene area. Nothing. Scale, polish, exam, you know, wipe everything off with gauze, brush on a little bit, very carefully apply a little APF foam. It goes absorbed very quickly. That was actually one of our research projects years ago. And then you know, hey, you're good for 6 months. We can take you off our worry list. How do they check out? They check out remotely. Of course, we'll show you all the recommendations from the different states. But what we do is we send through NextHealth a request payment. Like you got one right here I made up for you. We sent the patient, Joe got cash a couple days ago while he was checking out. The reason for the procedure, well, I need to pay my bills. And it was for an amount of $1 million. I figure if Joe got cash at $1 million, like the government's spending trillions, it's no big deal. He can help me out a little bit. Meanwhile, the receptionist is behind protective shields, has a mask and gloves. Fortunately, with Illinois, I'm just showing Illinois. This is a few days old. Could have updated it, but I didn't want to change everything. It appears that the death rate is definitely going down. We've flattened. But things to look out for: COVID toes. You know, when you start talking about patients, about COVID toes, you see all the stuff showing up about these autoimmune reactions showing up like in Europe and young people. So young people aren't completely immune. They're having something going on and they get these COVID toes. And this is actually a person who had a punch biopsy done. Have them send me a picture of their punch biopsy done on it. This was originally diagnosed as chilblains, and someone whose feet had never been cold. So this is really kind of interesting. This is quite unnerving. It would really unnerve me is using telemedicine, looking at some of the things I'm seeing around erupting teeth. Of course, there's a broken primary molar there, but I'm seeing, oh, what is all that stuff going down there? Damn, that almost looks like that's a, mom took that picture and sent it to me. Man, is that really just irritation from that broken primary tooth? Probably. Or is that COVID gums? I'm thinking like, whoa. So I've had this pediatric, very famous dermatologist talking about it. And, you know, it's a possibility. You know, unlikely, but it's a possibility. What the heck? So as unlikely, we mentioned, we have all these zoonotic diseases. This is what happens when humans and animals intersect, and you have what's called crowd disease. You crowd a whole bunch of animals together, then you stack them on top of humans. You're going to have issues like this, crowd disease, right? Now, we mentioned pandemics. Well, 1918, the famous one, the Spanish flu pandemic that went through and killed 50 to 100 million people. I mean, just awful, 3 to 5% of the world's population. It caused a cytokine storm, just like you often see with COVID-19, right? And then it went away. But it doesn't mean that we won't have something come back. I mean, this is the key thing on it. And it's really fascinating because, you know, if you read some of the literature, they say it actually started in the United States, that they actually think that patient 0 was in Kansas at an American boot camp. And patient 0 was one of the group that was assigned to work with pigs or bring pigs in to be slaughtered to feed the guys at the boot camp. And it got spread through facilities like this where no one wore a mask and coughing people were only feet away from others. So good old crowd disease, right? And of course, we have a number of zoonotic diseases like canine flu, swine flu, avian flu, bird flu, other words, you know, and so on. Many outbreaks, and they're not going to stop. We had swine flu too, remember? And all these things are just examples of zoonotic diseases between animals and humans, like anthrax and dengue and Ebola hemorrhagic and Lyme disease, malaria and plague, and all these have influenced us a lot. In fact, 75% of recently emerging infectious diseases come from animals, And 60% of all the pathogens we have are zoonotic. So the vast majority of bacteria we have are actually zoonotic, or at least the majority of them. So this is happening because of crowds. You know, the major killers of humanities are really getting to be, and we're not going to get less crowded. I mean, you know, there's more and more people every year, right? And this is a picture that was colorized, taken in, I think, the 1890s in New York City. I mean, even back then they worried about New York City because of the concentration of people, right? And crowd disease wasn't a problem back when we were all hunter-gatherers and slash and burning and moving all the time. And in fact, many diseases like tuberculosis, they now have seen, or they now theorize, actually got started about 50,000 years ago before it came to us from cattle, because there was a cattle connection too with TB after domestication. But they theorized the first form started with a bad killer, adapted to that, so it would not kill off the entire tribe, so it could go and become a slow consumption, just like some other famous pathogen. Which other famous pathogen? Porphyromonas gingivalis Vimy type 2, which also eventually kills the host. Causes periodontal disease, causes inflammatory Alzheimer's, right? Causes atherosclerosis, and eventually the host dies from Porphyromonas gingivalis Vimy type 2. So you see, that's another one of those stealth organisms that slowly but surely infiltrates the entire population, but slowly kills. So it has a chance to pass from generation to generation. And so you have all these things that have come from cattle, from pigs, from birds, and so on. And that's not going to stop. We can add bats to that list now, right? So what are the legal concerns? Well, I sat down and actually talked to an attorney last week, and he was very well versed in testing. And he said this basically, that, you know, there's two main concerns. One is for the patients, and if you spread a disease in your office, you have great liability, especially if you're seeing patients before you're allowed to reopen. That's a problem. The other thing is your team members. If a team member suddenly gets sick and they claim they got it at the office, there's already a bill in Congress trying to protect employers from what they think will be a rash of lawsuits of employees suing their employer because I went to work and I got sick. Okay, so there's really nothing new about all this except for the occurrence of a pandemic with a highly contagious pathogen, right? So you need, if you have a concern with the patients, you need to have a non-invasive, reliable test. And we have that with the oral DNA test, with the microgenetics. So you have those, you can add that to your preventive programs, which already should be using a salivary or plaque sampling of some sort. So all these things have been around for years and years and years. It's not like you're inventing something new and saying, oh my God, I'm doing this something very new. Team members are a different story altogether because we have not been testing our team members before. So we have all these other things we mentioned, like liability from employment and liability of having them work and having someone get sick. God forbid you have, I have some employees that have been with me 20 some odd years, almost 30 years, and some of them are older. And what happens if one gets sick and they die because they came back to work? Besides the fact that we feel horrible, have you protected them? This is why we need to have our organized dentistry backing us up on this. We need to protect our employees. Now, Alabama says the same thing. They have this whole list of things. Employee protective measures. You can read all this online. I'm not going to spend your time right now reiterating everything. But you got to make sure you have gloves and gowns and you dispose of them. They got to have N95 masks, full face shields, disposable gowns. Waiting area, the office should be completely closed. Even they say, just check them in out in the parking lot, which you can probably do that in Alabama. We can't do that in Chicago for sure. Got to make sure you train your employees. That's a requirement. Got to adhere to all the guidelines. You got to train. You got to get them in early and train them. And that's what we're planning on doing too. We're getting started training on Monday. This is so important. You have to have certain equipment. They say, well, how about screens? Well, a lot of people aren't doing screens. I think you should do a screen. I think it just shows that you care to the team and to your patients, right? Credit cards. Go to touchless right away. Don't do anything where they have to sign. I wouldn't even do self-service. That should be done over the phone. Have them call, talk to them over the phone, make sure everything's done. You got to make sure everything is totally clean. You got to have everything and you have to have it listed. So they want you to go down and make a list right away that you have everything before you open and see patients. If they are sick, they cannot work. You don't want them coming into work. You want to keep them separated from each other too. Everyone still has to do the 6 foot, that is the patients, away from each other. All equipment should be clean and sterilized. I'm all for that. Bathroom in the office will be sanitized by staff after each use. Thank God our patient bathroom's in the hallway. It's not actually in the office, it's in the hallway. I think we'll tell people just to go home and use a bathroom at home. But offices, we do have 4 bathrooms for employees only within the office, which are now also their changing rooms because they have to change at the office before they go home and when they come in. And also, you should have air purification, right? You should have the air purification. Call them beforehand, check them out beforehand. When they come up, make sure they've been checked out. Make sure they know they can't come in sick and they have to have a mask. Now, some places are saying you have to provide the patient a mask and you have to provide them a gown. What? We don't have that type of PPE. How many people have that extra PPE? I sure don't have that. So again, signage, have an inventory, remove the magazines. This is from Indiana. All surfaces. So what we have to do now is we have an elevator. We have to go out and clean the elevator button off all the time. But if we clean the outside elevator button off, who's cleaning the one down the first floor? We're doing the one on the 3rd floor. Who's doing the one on the 1st floor? Who's doing one inside the elevator? I mean, I can see us cleaning the hallway and cleaning the buttons, but we're not the only tenant up here. How about the other tenants on the 3rd floor? These are all things I don't think anyone has thought about. And of course, dental health care professionals should change your scrubs to personal clothing. Absolutely. So this is what you look like, right? This is from the CDC. Please don't use your hefty garbage bags. Talk about negative publicity. Wow, putting on a hefty garbage bag to keep your outside clean, that just seemed like a waste. You didn't have to do that. You got some clear plastic bags too, for that matter, and been hard for people to see that they're a garbage bag. But again, this is what you need to have according to the CDC, although studies are showing you're safer with an N95 for aerosol procedures. Non-aerosol, they're saying, maybe you can do a regular face mask. Well, I want to thank you all for listening. I only ran a minute over, which I think is really good considering all the stuff I was talking about, right? I have a disclaimer here. I've got to say about this disclaimer. Anything I told you today could be wrong tomorrow. It could be wrong next week. They could do some tests and find some of these things don't work, like the UV mask sterilizers. The only way we're going to know is when the testing comes in. We're opening before we have testing that's completely available. I'm trying to work very hard to get the surface testing so you can actually, if you have a unit, you could put and test it to make sure everything is as advertised, which I think is extremely important. Got a bunch of questions. I'm going down to the questions and answers, and I'll do the someone very first question is, how do you suggest to create a closed room and semi-open rooms for aerosol procedures? Holy cow, good question. I don't know how. I am so happy I have doors I can close now. You know, I did have it more open, and many years ago. Like I said, I've been out here for over almost 40 years, close to 40 years. And my first office design was far more open. Our orthodontic area is open, our hygiene area is open, but I don't know how you would do it. And I just think for safety, it'd be nice to have it closed. I just don't know how you're going to do it without remodeling. I do know of offices that have the last 3 weeks remodeled, and they have gone in, they've had people just put a plexiglass barrier up and trim it. And I made my own barriers. How do loops work with a face shield? Not well at all. In fact, I fog up. What company did you order UVC device? Can you please talk more about that? Well, Germ Guardian is out there, and here's a funny story. I don't know how true this is. I will preface this. This is what I was told. I was told by someone who's very, very up on the research and has looked at these units in detail that the units I got, the Germ Guardian ones, are exactly the same just rebranded and renamed, that someone is selling to dental units for 5 times the cost, which would make sense because quite frankly, that has happened every time, right? Something has come out, someone will just buy a whole bunch up wholesale and put their own name on it and then sell it for 5 times more. So in testing, we don't have enough testing supplies to be able to test like this. Oh, yeah, there are. Yeah, Dana, there's enough. You just go sign in for oral DNA or microgendex right now. Get going on the salivary testing. Yes, they are mainly emphasizing dental offices. You're not competing with the hospitals that much with this. Although University of Minnesota uses a lot of the oral DNA testing at their clinics that are reopening, or at least that's what I was told they're going to be. And so, yeah, definitely. We don't take something from the hospital. That's what happened with our Biosys test, right? Does medical or dental insurance cover these tests? I understand by law they have to. Who pays for the testing? As I understand by law they have to, but it's limited to a certain amount. So let's see here. And then someone had a comment about people being genetically predisposed to how the diseases are. And you know what? Quite frankly, go read the research on genetic predisposition, and you find that a lot of these are all epigenetic diseases. They're epigenetic diseases that are causing. In other words, if you have a high carb diet, you change your microbiome. Tons of research. I'm actually part of the Simpson Query Epigenetics Center at Northwestern University, and the world's top experts in this will tell you, yeah, you may have a predisposition, but you need to make sure that you have a good diet because it's the high carbs are causing a lot of the issues. And you know what? I'm sorry that some people, one person thought that was controversial. But if you go and really check on that, you'll find that you need to, and this epigenetically does mean it can be passed on to a future generation though. So that's why we need to start now. So test is given time, but days later could be positive. Yes, when you give a test to someone, like a salivary test, they're supposed to do self-isolation. So if you have a big procedure plan, let's say I'm doing an outpatient surgery case on Tuesday, and they have their test run on Friday, we get the results back Monday afternoon. That weekend, that patient is supposed to be in self-isolation. They're not supposed to be going out and doing anything because you don't want them coming down sick in the meanwhile. Okay. And let's see here. I think we're right. There's a lot of questions. I cannot go through all these. There are so many. And some of these I'm really sad to read because it's a Butler Prophy Cup safe to use? Does it create any aerosols? No, I've used it for actually many years. It's wonderful use on special needs patients, on very young kids. You're not producing any aerosol. That you'd use it with the electric handpiece. It runs at very slow RPM. Still does a beautiful job cleaning. In fact, in study, at least one study done, it was more efficient than using your typical Prophy Cup and with Prophy paste. Is it only the fluoride foam that is working? No, there's other forms of fluoride that work. However, fluoride varnish does work too on older populations. It's just on the very young kids. Can you use chlorhexidine for your rinses? Chlorhexidine, I don't know. Chlorhexidine is an enzyme inhibitor. I don't know if it directly works against SARS-CoV-2. As an enzyme inhibitor, that would be unusual because normally you're breaking down the protective lipoprotein wall of it. You're not going after enzyme inhibition with it. It utilizes the cell's enzymatic mechanisms. So I would say probably not chlorhexidine. Besides, chlorhexidine is contraindicated in anyone with high blood pressure. So there's a lot of contraindications, right, to chlorhexidine because it increases your blood pressure. There's like 7 major studies done on chlorhexidine high blood pressure. Someone from Canada saying air purifiers are getting trendy here in Canada. Claim to reduce the settling time of aerosols from 3 hours to 20, 30 minutes or shorter gaps between patients. Any evidence-based documents supporting? I don't know. I wish I did know. If you find some, would you please send me the literature? I'd like to see it. I've been looking around to see if they have any basis for it. It would make sense. It does clear out aerosols, and they have used it before for aerosol cleansing, and they have other studies done with other viruses. So it's worth it considering the cost. And besides, it makes your team feel better. It makes your patients feel better. And I would absolutely love to see people just do whatever you can. Maybe it's only 10% better, but hey, you know, if you're going to accidentally infect 10 people over the next 3 months, make it 9, not 10. And that's the way I look at it. I think every step that we take can help. How many times can you disinfect N95s? Lots of stuff in the literature on that. UV, I think it was only like 3 times, right? And you can autoclave it like 4 or 5 times. I think the best was a vaporous hydrogen peroxide, which I tried to order one of those units. I was unable to. Maybe they're available now, but I was unable to order it. That's why the steam might be okay. Do you have to change the protective gown for each patient? It depends on the state. Some states say yes. Others say if you're doing a non-aerosol, you can keep the same thing on, like if you're an orthodontist. Where did you buy the UVC from? I'm afraid some websites might sell UVC that are non-effective. I'm afraid of that too. We have to really look at the literature when they finally do a lot of testing. Guys, I think I am out of time. I'm getting a message here that I need to finish up. So let's see, is 3:10? I did not get anywhere near through all the questions, and I apologize. And always when I give a presentation, I don't mean to offend anyone, but I'm just saying, hey, let's go ahead. Let's do the best we can for our patients. Let's do everything we can for our patients, and let's do everything we can for our team members. A lot of them are like family, right? Like I said, I've got people who've worked for me almost 30 years. Yeah, it's just like they're like family, so I want them to be safe. So thank you so much. And Phil, are you back? So at this point,
Yes. I'm here. That was an excellent presentation, Dr. Cannon. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you, Phil.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Cannon on some great podcasts as well. So we're going to be doing some podcasts with Dr. Cannon later today on special needs patients, which is very interesting stuff that he has to talk about.